Hello.
Start kar.
Good evening, everybody. We are back after a 2 week break.
Yeah, I was actually on a work trip and
We were both traveling.
yeah, and there was a lot of work, so we just didn't get the time to even record ourselves over VC. So we thought that we'll do it once we're back in Gurgaon. And today, we thought that the topic of discussion would
We
be the
would,
presidential debate.
yeah, this is the
Yeah,
first time we are discussing the domestic politics of another country. We have always talked about international relations a lot,
yeah,
but for the first time, we'll be delving into the US presidential election because that's the flavor of the season. The run up to the elections are very close, and just a couple of days back, you had the Donald Trump Kamala Harris debate, and let's trace the discussion. We will share our opinions on the discussion. We will share our thoughts, and we will make some concluding statements at the end of the
yeah.
episode. It's important to talk about the US presidential debate because, for many reasons, US headquarters some of the most important companies in the world. The US election has a wide ranging impact on rest of the world. The US security apparatus is deeply involved in the situation in the Russia, the situation in the Middle East, and the US deeply tries to engage with even the Asia Pacific region. So, in a way, what happens in the US presidential election sort of impacts the whole world. And I think the US, for better or for worse, for their strength, is always trying to keep it that way. And it goes to polls later this year. Jay, let's get your thoughts over the debate of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump that happened a couple of days
I'm
ago.
gonna keep it short because I feel that Donald Trump was not organized at all with his thoughts. And every trap that was laid for him by Kamala Harris, I think he just fell for those traps. He wasn't very confident in his responses. And I felt that whatever slight doubt that we had with respect to what his policies are towards immigrants,
Mhm.
those were clarified once we saw him say that the immigrants who come to the United States actually eat the neighbor's pets. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, we always associated, countries like Eastern Europe or African countries to have such cartoonish political leaders. But with Donald Trump, we can actually say that even the so called first world has now fallen down to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I think Donald Trump is a very confident man.
Yeah,
He is a very successful man. Prior to his political career, he was a very talented real estate businessman. He did very well to kind of make a name for himself, even in the political circles. He had a presidency tenure which is based on debate on how it actually was. But I think when we talk about this debate, we will see how the aspect of Donald Trump, which likes to sort of trigger his opponent, or which sort of likes to bully his opponent a little bit, was very calmly handled by Kamala Harris.
yeah,
I'm not a huge fan of any politician in the US because, frankly, I've never felt like I have any skin in the game. And just as an objective observer, I'm not saying that Kamala Harris is winning anybody's support by that, but I do think that she did a great job of handling the bullying and handling the attacking very well. She kind of always had a smile on her face, as much as Donald Trump was trying to make more and many more comments about her politics. She would always push back with some sort of logic. I think that she was also trying to play this interesting game where Kamala Harris was trying to draw a wedge between the average military supporter, Republican voter who may be sort of on the fence with Donald Trump by saying that a lot of military leaders are critical of Donald Trump. Kamala Harris kept circling back to the point that in the first tenure, he had some generals who served in the Trump administration. He had his national security advisor, John Bolton, who's not a general, but he was still in the security apparatus. And these are all big, well respected names in the security apparatus who ended up being very critical of Donald Trump. So I think she played this move very smartly, where the rational Republican, the sort of, the clubhouse Republicans, as many people call them, might actually be on the fence about voting for Donald Trump, and might actually have been swung over to the camp of Kamala Harris by this debate. And I think that there was also a part where I think Kamala Harris started resisting her far left image that has been built around so many Democrats. Because I remember this 1 second of discussion from the debate that really stuck with me was when Trump said that she's going to ban all your guns, or she's going to take away all your guns. Kamala Harris said something to the extent of that, I'm a gun owner. I'm not quoting her word to word, but the essence was that I'm a gun owner, so you stop spreading lies. So she's sort of she's playing into that arena where she can very well attract some Republican votes
Of
also.
course, of course.
And where the loss of Donald Trump comes in was that a factor that was working in his favor was that Joe Biden was naturally very low on energy. His age played a role against him. He had certain health issues, and that would always be used against him. And Trump would always come as this bullish, sort of muscular figure who would tone him down. But Kamala Harris is much younger. She's in much better shape mentally, and she can always resist it, and she can sort of push back. And that was the example we saw on that debate. So I think Kamala Harris did quite an all right
Absolutely.
job. I think Trump is still very popular. He's still very, very popular amongst masses in the US. He still has a very good chance at this election. Too early to do predictions, but I think this debate, I think Kamala Harris
Yeah, she wins
will
round
get
one, definitely.
yeah, I mean, she did a good job. I
Yeah,
don't know who wins this. The
yeah.
only winner will be in the elections,
Round
right?
one, I'm talking about the debate.
Yeah, fair.
Anyway, so
Let's get
I
your thoughts.
feel
I've been
there
talking
are
for a
two
while.
very important things that both of them talked about, which are extremely important for the present politics of the United States of America, specifically keeping in mind the white Protestant population. And Protestant is an umbrella term which includes a lot of groups. I'm not so Protestant is not a singular term; it is a variegated term which includes a lot of different churches: the Baptists, the Evangelists, the Anglicans. There are many different groups. So they're essentially targeting these groups. Take the example of Roe versus Wade, which was basically a judgment which uh, ensured that abortion is legalized in the United States of America. And it was through Donald Trump's impaneled judges in the United States Supreme Court that this essential judgment or precedent was revoked, and abortion again became illegal when it comes to the federal law, right? So this essentially alienated a massive woman voter base for Donald Trump, whereas from the angle of the Protestants, the white Protestants, it actually played right into their sentiments. And Donald Trump in the debate again tried to say that 9-month-old children are, being killed in the name of abortion, which was quite quite vociferously denied by the moderator of the debate. That is number one. Number two, during the discussion, there was also talk of Israel and the conflict that is happening in Gaza right now. Donald Trump accused Kamala Harris of being anti Israel, and he went on to say that because she is anti Israel, there would be a time that Israel would cease to exist, which I feel was quite a bullish statement to make. But to counter that, she said that I've always been in support of Israel. I've done everything that I could in my limited capacity to be in favor of Israel and Israel's policy, is what she was trying to say. Again, so here Kamala is trying to balance her act, because through Roe v. Wade, she has lost that white Protestant vote, right? But by endorsing the Israeli government, suddenly she wins a certain white Protestant vote, which was a bit hesitant in, going and voting for Kamala,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to
Yeah, I think
talk
you
about.
you've just furthered my point
Yeah,
where I was saying that Kamala Harris is not simply playing into the cliche
exactly.
of the far left woman of
Yeah,
color Democrat. She's taking fairly conservative stances.
absolutely.
She's taking a very pro national security
Hmm.
stance. She's taking some stances with the which the original white American voter will be very comfortable with. I think the average American Republican voter is very concerned with issues of national security, and very, very supportive of the state of Israel. and by making these statements, I think she's brought a sense of comfort even to that voter. And
Absolutely.
I think that the US policy of supporting Israel, in my view, is going to be more aggressive in a Democrat era, especially because Donald Trump is such a businessman. His foreign policy always has this element of him trying to sign peace deals and him flying all over the world and saying, I brought peace between the UAE and the Israelis. I mean, not peace, but he got them
Hmm.
to open diplomatic channels with each other. So Donald Trump always prides himself in the fact of being able to
Absolutely.
create these deals. So if he hypothetically wins this election, I think his first foreign policy agenda would be to calm the situation in
The Middle East.
the Middle East, Ukraine and Russia.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, I think Kamala Harris, if she continues a Democratic tenure and replaces Joe Biden as president, she would continue the stance of sort of supplying Israel with weapons
Absolutely.
and supplying the Ukrainians with weapons till as long as it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So I think there is a foreign policy difference that, as an observer, I can sort of see. I don't know how true this holds by empirical evidence. I'm not making a statement where I'm saying this is statistically held, but that's what I've seen. Even in the recent history in my lifetime, because I'm only 25 years old. So prior to this, major impact that the US would have in the Asian region would be with drone attacks
In Pakistan.
in areas of NWFP in
Yeah, yeah.
Pakistan, in
FATA
that area.
region. FATA
And
region, yeah.
those drone attacks were primarily conducted in the Obama
Yeah,
administration.
absolutely. And
As
Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize. So, yeah, I mean, you
I
can
mean,
say that the
yeah,
Western Hemisphere stands for rights and the right thing and democracy, but a person who kind of conducted war crimes was given a,
yeah,
Nobel
drone
Prize.
attacks were so frequent in
Yeah,
Pakistan in those days. People used to make
absolutely.
jokes that the national bird of
Yeah,
Pakistan is actually an American drone.
yeah.
So, anyway, I think
To
that yeah.
sorry to
No, no,
interject,
no.
Raj, but to add to what you're saying, let's not forget that the attacks on Israel on the 7th of October happened during the tenure of Biden, and the last 1 year, the wanton violence that we've seen in Israel and in Gaza, specifically against the Palestinians, can easily count as a genocide on, like, terms to term basis, and this happened during the time of Biden, during the time or the era of Democrats. So there is a there is a sense of confusion here, because whenever I see a Democrat government come into picture, there has been lot more interventions in international politics
Oh,
as
for sure.
compared to, like, Republicans.
Yeah.
I'm not discounting the Bush era. Of course, the Bush era was also quite unique in its way, but at the end of the day, there are certain things that the American deep state would ensure is done from different, governments, whether it's the Democrats, whether it's the Republicans. But in the recent history, you had the Democrats being more interfering in international conflicts as compared to the Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of their this championing of international democracy and those orders has always been more of a Democrat principle. But then people might argue that the invasion of Iraq
Exactly.
happened
That's why
in
I
the Bush
talked about the
tenure.
Bush.
I
Yeah.
think that foreign policy for the US remains largely stable,
Yeah.
regardless of the party. Many American foreign policy commentators always maintain that politics ends where the coastline begins. So when the US coast sort of ends and when you hit the international waters, all US opinions are the same and they sort of don't really debate domestic politics, which is sort of a stable indicator. Even in
Absolutely.
India, we try to maintain our foreign policy and our foreign service
Yeah.
fairly apolitical, and our diplomatic stance rarely changes with change in government. We've seen that the Modi government, which was seen perceived as fairly right wing, has also
Yeah.
always supported the
The
Palestinian
two-state
cause,
solution.
always supported a two-state solution.
Visited Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, Narendra Modi also has I think he holds the highest civilian honor of Palestine,
Yeah,
or at least has been awarded something
yeah,
by the state of Palestine.
absolutely.
So I think foreign policy is always consistent. Politicians are also prudent to take advice from their career diplomats, and that
Yeah,
aspect doesn't change. even with the US, I think this holds true most strongly. I think with the 1990s starting, there was a opening up of the US India ties. We will shift this discussion to now India US relations a little bit, because as our interest is in observing the elections in the US, is because it will at some level impact the India US relations. India started opening up to the US in the time of Narasimha Rao, when Narasimha Rao was the Indian Prime Minister. I think George Bush Sr. was the US President. And then there was a lot of opening up of economic relations as well. And I think, regardless of Democrat or Republican, India has maintained ties which were quite all right. We had the Houston show with Trump and Modi
Yeah.
in the stadium in 2019. In 2020, we had Trump in Ahmedabad in
Mhm.
that stadium,
Namaste, Trump.
Namaste Trump event. So I think the posturing is a little bit more dramatic, maybe when Republicans are in tenure, but India maintains stable relations, Republicans, Democrats, etc. And even US foreign policy doesn't change much in summary. For last example being that Donald Trump's election campaign in 2015-16 was trying to be tough on China, and when the Biden administration came, it actually ended up being tougher on China than his predecessor.
Absolutely.
So, but these things are very subjective, right?
Yeah.
So let's take the discussion forward, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel what we're going to see now is that whichever government that comes in, their stance towards Russia is going to toughen. And the conflicts, irrespective of Kamala Harris or Trump, in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, specifically between the Russians and the Ukrainians, is gonna go on for a while because at the end of the day, like you said, the foreign policy does not really change, and right now the short-term foreign policy goals for the West, quote unquote, NATO and Americans, is to destabilize the Russian hegemony of Eastern Europe, specifically places like Belarus and all these other former Soviet satellite states, and also dethroning Putin. That is one of their short term political goals. I think the other short term political goals for the West right now would be to pacify Netanyahu, pacify the absolutely uh, all guns blazing policy of the Likud party, which has led to quite justified comparison between the Likud party and the Nazi party to an extent. That is a
Yeah.
pretty controversial statement to make, but the statements that certain leaders of the Likud party has made specifically against the Arabs, the Muslims, is nothing short
Yeah, I
of
think
what the Nazis used to say about Jews. So that is what I would like to say.
Yeah, I think in my view, for some reason, I have a feeling that the Gaza issue will at some level play a role even in the elections in the
Yeah,
US this time,
absolutely.
as will the Russia Ukraine thing, as will smaller international
Hmm.
issues like the controversy about the gender of the boxer in the Paris Olympics,
Yeah,
because gender and
yeah,
transgenderism is such an important issue in US politics, that and in this globalized, hyper sensitive, information driven world, information travels within between borders so quickly that the US domestic politics has absorbed a few of these international issues into its domestic politics quite intimately. I think that whichever government comes, whether it will be Kamala Harris as president or Donald Trump as president again, I think the US government will focus on pushing through the revitalization of the Quad. They will try to develop
yes.
some technological relations with India, and they will have an Indo-Pacific strategy which involves India at its center stage.
Mm.
Because forgive me, because I think the US at some level understands India's importance with respect to China. So I think there will be a sort of posturing, regardless of whether the Democrats win or the Republicans win, which will be related to Quad
Absolutely.
tech and China. So Quad tech and China will be
Yeah.
an important facet of the next US president with respect to India in the Asia Pacific, regardless of who it is. And I think those are my concluding remarks.
Same.
I think
That those we can like
we can
conclude the
end the
conversation.
conversation here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Like
for
and
joining us.
subscribe, and
Like
we
and subscribe,
apologize that
please.
we weren't able to upload for such a long time, but we had our reasons and we understand that you'll understand our perspective.
Thank
Love
you.
you, Shabak here. And also, the fact that I'm criticizing Israel does not mean that I'm anti Semitic. That means that I'm just against a far right dictatorial government which is killing civilians. And also, Hamas wasn't right in conducting its attacks. Hamas is a radical Islamist organization which needs to be criticized. And also, there is evidence to show that certain numbers that are coming out of this conflict are also exaggerated. So, the numbers that are coming on your screen, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, because what has happened is that there has been information obfuscation because of so much bombardment and the destruction of hospitals by the Israeli government. So you cannot really rely on any type of information with respect to the dead that is coming out of Gaza. So take that with a pinch of salt and be very, very careful before making generalizations about anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you for joining us.